talk for a few moments about the importance of personal ministry, and then I want to share a few resources with you that might help you in your church. So if you go back to the book of Mark, chapter 16 and verse 15, you find this commission given to the church, a little bit different from the Matthew 8 commission to go and make disciples, but very closely connected. It says, go into the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Now, the idea of preaching the gospel is sharing our faith. It's not necessarily carrying around a pulpit and preaching to a crowd. In the early church, in Acts chapter 8, you'll find that right after the stoning of Stephen, there was a persecution that arose. This is what it says in Acts 8:1. At that time, a great persecution arose against the church, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. So catch the picture here. The early church has begun to have a measure of growth through the day of Pentecost and continued ministry. But now there's this persecution that is growing. And as a result, everybody is scattered. Everybody, that is, except the apostles, the leaders, the pastors, if you will. So the ones who are scattered are the church members. And just a few verses later in verse 4, it says something fascinating. It says, those who are scattered, that's the church members, not the pastors, went everywhere preaching the word. This was the model of church growth in the early church. It wasn't dependent upon the pastors, but the members preached. That doesn't mean that they stood behind a pulpit necessarily, but they were fulfilling the commission in Mark 16 to go and preach the gospel, to share their faith, to tell what Jesus had done for them, and to speak of the truth of God's word. Now, the Apostle Paul had a way of integrating this type of personal ministry that the church members did with public ministry as well. He told the elders in Ephesus, I kept back nothing that was helpful, but proclaimed it to you and taught you publicly and from house to house. Here's the secret to a really strong evangelistic ministry is when you have both public proclamation and personal ministry. Ellen White says the same thing, but she makes a very important point that we need to note here. She says, your work may accomplish more real good than the more extensive meetings, the more public, large-scale meetings, like an evangelistic meeting per se, if they lack in personal effort. When both are combined, like they were with the Apostle Paul, with the blessing of God, a more perfect and thorough work may be wrought. So the best route is to combine public with personal ministry. But, she says, if we can have but one part done, which part would it be? She says, let it be the individual labor of opening the scriptures in households, making personal appeals, and talking familiarly with the members of the family, not about things of little importance, but of the great themes of redemption. I find that for many churches that struggle evangelistically, if they lean one way or the other, they end up leaning toward public evangelistic meetings. And the church members themselves might not be actively engaged in personal ministry, sharing the scriptures in households, giving Bible studies. And I think that it's important that in this passage we learn that while combining them is the ideal situation, that the most important element is not the corporate ministry, the public ministry, but the important element of ministry is personal ministry. If we're going to emphasize one and make sure that one's not missing, it should be the personal ministry of giving Bible studies on a personal level, sharing the truth on a personal level, building relationships on a personal level. This is why I appreciate the new strategic plan for this quinquennium of the General Conference. I will go. Certainly we will go together, but the emphasis is on personal ministry. I will go. Local church ministries should be developed that encourage, train, and equip members for personal ministry. That's why foundational church ministries are those that equip the members for their own personal ministries. Each of these 5 foundational ministries that were mentioned earlier to address the different phases of the disciple-making process equip the church members to be engaged themselves in active personal ministry, either training them or resourcing them for that type of ministry. Ellen White says that every church should be a training school for Christian workers. That's why the primary focus of local church ministries is not to win souls. Now, I know that may sound a little bit radical, but let's think about what this is saying. If the church is to be a training school, then the primary focus of local church ministries is not to win souls, but to train and equip members to win souls. And this is a similar function that ministers are given. Ellen White says ministers preach the truths that will lead to personal labor for those who are out of Christ, encourage personal effort in every possible way. She also says in every church, the members should be so trained that they will devote time to the winning of souls to Christ. Let those who have charge of the flock of Christ, she's referring here to the ministers, to the pastors, awake to their duty and set many souls to work. You see, the role of the minister is first and foremost to train the members for soul winning service. She says again, let ministers teach church members that in order to grow in spirituality, they must carry the burden that the Lord has laid upon them, the burden of leading souls into the truth. It's not just important for reaching others, but leading souls into the truth, being engaged in witnessing and sharing our faith with others and leading them to accept Christ and the Bible truths that make us who we are. This process is not only needed for them, but in order for us to grow in spirituality. And ministers are instructed through the spirit of prophecy to teach church members this important truth. So what we want is the decentralization of ministry. Local churches should always work toward this decentralization. This means that the primary role of pastors is to mentor, train, equip, and encourage personal ministry. And Ellen White warns that there's a danger of centralization. She says everywhere there is a tendency to substitute the work of organizations for individual effort. In other words, focus on church programs instead of on personal ministry. But she says Christ commits to his followers on individual work. I'm seeing this and saying the Lord is calling us back to personal ministries, back to the early church model, where those who were scattered, and you'll remember that was the lay members of the church, went everywhere, preaching the word, sharing their faith. God is calling us back to that early church model of church growth, personal ministries. And when we do this, here's the beauty of it. Ellen White says one soul won to the truth will be instrumental in winning others, and there will be an ever-increasing result of blessing and salvation. How many souls? One soul. Each soul won to the truth becomes instrumental in winning others. And when this is our model of discipleship, when personal ministries is at the heart of the church's evangelistic strategy, then we no longer simply add to our congregations, we begin to multiply disciples. And this is how the work will be finished. And Jesus will be, his coming will be hastened, and we will be prepared to meet him. So here's the model of grow your church that has no ending. It just continues, because with every disciple, they in turn make other disciples, and this multiplication is at the heart of the grow model of discipleship, which is really simply the model given to us by Jesus in the Gospels.